The ballroom glittered like a frozen constellation, each chandelier a cluster of captured stars, their light fracturing over polished parquet floors where ladies in silken gowns glided like swans. The orchestra strings whispered beneath the chatter, a murmur of elegance that softened the sharp edges of gossip. Outside, snow clung to the tall mullioned windows, a delicate frost that blurred the world beyond, while inside, the warmth of candlelight kissed the marble pillars and gilded mirrors. Among the glittering crowd she stood, a solitary figure whose pale lavender gown seemed almost to absorb the light, leaving her as a delicate silhouette against the grandeur. Her hair, a cascade of honey waves pinned with modest pearls, trembled slightly as she shifted her weight, hands clasped in front of her, fingers twisting the lace cuff of her sleeve. Lady Eleanor Ashcroft was not yet known to scandal, yet the room's invisible currents of judgment weighed upon her shoulders like the very frost on the glass. Whispers, soft, venomous, deliberate, curled around her name, muttered from behind fans and gloved hands. She caught the edge of a phrase, quite misplaced, utterly foolish, and her stomach knotted. Her eyes, wide and luminous beneath their delicate lashes, sought refuge in the shimmering folds of her gown, but there was none. Every gaze felt sharpened by the barbed precision of society, every polite nod an assessment, every smile a potential trap. The hum of conversation was a chorus of expectation. Marriage, alliances, reputation, and she had yet to navigate these treacherous waters. The moment fractured further when a hush swept through the room. All eyes turned toward the center, toward the one whose arrival always commanded attention without pretense, the Duke of Blackmoor. Tall, impossibly composed, his dark coat trimmed with gold embroidery outlined a silhouette of authority. He moved with the precision of someone accustomed to both command and scrutiny, the angle of his jaw illuminated by the crystal glow above. Yet tonight, there was a subtle smirk, almost imperceptible, a shadowed acknowledgement of something only he knew. A murmur rippled through the assembly. Whispers of a fiancée, of contracts signed, of a match made in ink and obligation rather than affection. And in that instant, Lady Eleanor's world narrowed to a single, piercing moment. The announcement, delivered with the soft cruelty of a polished hostess, cut through the warmth of the room like a winter's gale. Lady Eleanor will not be the Duke's intended. It breathed, each syllable a dagger masked by civility. Gasps followed, delicate hands fluttering to lips, fans snapping open in shock. Her knees weakened slightly, the polished floor beneath her seemed to tilt. Mortification pooled like ink in her chest, spreading tendrils to her cheeks. She had walked into this hall certain of her place as merely a guest, yet now, in the eyes of every noble assembled, she was marked. Humiliation, sweet and bitter, wrapped around her like an unwanted cloak. From the corner of the ballroom, his gaze found hers. The Duke, the man whose name inspired awe, whose presence could command silence or laughter, lingered there with the faintest twist of amusement in his eyes. Not mockery, not exactly, but something subtler. Curiosity, recognition, a hidden approval, or perhaps a test. Lady Eleanor's pulse leapt in dissonant rhythm. How could he look at her so steadily, so quietly, while the world condemned her in a breath? She wanted to retreat, to vanish beneath the folds of her skirts, yet a spark, a dangerous, thrilling ember, stirred within her chest. She could not look away, even as whispers began to gnaw like winter frost at the edges of her composure. Her mind raced, tracing the threads of her limited options. Depart quietly, endure the night, or, dare she, confront the eyes that dared not speak but revealed everything. She had been schooled in restraint, in the art of silence, in the delicate negotiation of dignity. Yet tonight, dignity felt like a fragile glass perched atop the hearth, ready to shatter under the weight of eyes that measured, judged, condemned. She drew in a trembling breath, trying to restore the poise she had rehearsed for so many anxious evenings. Each inhale was a struggle against the tightening grip of embarrassment, each exhale a quiet rebellion against surrender. A faint sound drew her attention, a soft rustle at her side. A small, folded note, placed with such care that it might have been left by accident, now trembled in the folds of her skirt. Her fingers, still shaking, unfolded it. The script was fine, deliberate, and immediately recognizable in its elegance. You are seen even when the world looks away. There was no signature, yet the weight of intention pressed upon her. The message was both reassurance and challenge, a whisper that the night, though cruel, contained mysteries beyond the surface of scandal. Her pulse quickened, hope threading through her mortification, a dangerous and exquisite contrast to the sting still burning her cheeks. Lady Eleanor's eyes swept the ballroom again, tracing the edges of gilded mirrors and the chandelier's trembling crystals, and she caught the Duke's glance once more. It lingered longer this time, unspoken, intimate, as if acknowledging the small rebellion she harbored in her very posture. Could he have sent the note? Was this merely coincidence? The very notion seemed absurd, yet intoxicating. In that suspended moment, humiliation began to mingle with intrigue, and a tremor of something unnamed, anticipation perhaps, crept along her spine. The music shifted then, strings rising in a poignant waltz that seemed to echo the tumult of her thoughts. Around her, the crowd's whispers continued, the polite murmurs of astonishment curling through the air. Yet she no longer felt entirely trapped. She felt, instead, the quiet stirrings of a plan, a spark of agency that had been absent when the announcement first struck. If the world sought to define her by rumor and assumption, perhaps she could quietly rewrite the narrative in small, subtle strokes. The note, the gaze, the faint smirk of a man both cruel and enigmatic, all these threads wove a tapestry of possibility, delicate yet unbreakable. A carriage bell chimed faintly in the distance, audible even over the murmur of voices. Snow brushed the windows like a whispered reminder that the world outside remained vast, cold, and unknowable. Lady Eleanor's fingers tightened around the note. Her heart thrummed with equal parts fear and resolve. Tonight had stripped her bare before the judgmental eyes of society, yet tonight, too, had placed a hidden hand upon her shoulder, offering a promise she could scarcely name. She lifted her chin, straightened her shoulders, and allowed a trembling smile to touch her lips, not for the ballroom, not for the whispers, but for the faint, dangerous hope that someone somewhere had seen her truly. And as the Duke's eyes met hers one last time before he turned, tall and inscrutable, toward the grand stairway, a thought settled unbidden in the quiet of her mind. Someone knows. Someone has already decided that she is more than the world says she is. A thrill of fear, a pulse of expectation, and a whisper of something forbidden threaded through her chest, leaving her poised on the edge of a night that promised both peril and revelation. Snow lay thick upon the cobblestones when Lady Eleanor ventured from the ballroom into the quiet streets, the muffled clatter of carriages and the distant clang of iron gates a faint accompaniment to her tumultuous thoughts. Each step through the winter air felt like walking through glass, brittle and sharp, yet exhilarating, a cruel kind of freedom after the suffocating weight of society's scrutiny. The note still rested in her gloved hand, its fine script pressing against her fingers as though imbued with a pulse of its own. She had read it countless times in the short hours since the announcement, each reading uncovering a new subtlety, a whisper of encouragement, and an unspoken intimacy that both alarmed and fascinated her. Who had sent it? The thought was at once impossible and irresistible. Her thoughts were interrupted by the rustle of skirts and the soft crunch of boots upon snow behind her. She turned to find a young maid, cheeks flushed with cold, carrying a small, elaborately wrapped parcel. "For you, milady," the girl murmured, bowing slightly before retreating with the kind of quick, nervous step that bespoke familiarity with secrets. Lady Eleanor's curiosity pricked, and she untied the ribbon with trembling hands. Inside lay a delicate brooch, a single sapphire encircled with gold filigree, understated yet exquisite, and upon the backing, etched in the same precise hand as the note, the words, "You are seen even when the world looks away." A thrill coursed through her, dangerous in its intensity, mingling with the residual sting of public embarrassment. She pressed it to her chest, feeling the cold metal against her lace bodice, and wondered if she should be frightened, grateful, or both. Back at the estate, she could not ignore the whispers that had followed her from the ballroom. Servants lingered in hallways, exchanging subtle glances, and in the drawing room her aunt's eyes, sharp and appraising, seemed to pierce through her composure. "I trust the evening was enlightening?" Lady Ashcroft's tone was polite, yet heavy with implication. Lady Eleanor inclined her head, aware that her face betrayed none of the turmoil roiling within. She could neither confess to humiliation nor reveal the strange kindness that had been delivered anonymously. Instead, she allowed herself a measured smile, fragile but deliberate, a small act of rebellion in the face of expectation. The days that followed were a delicate dance of observation and self-restraint. She discovered traces of her unknown benefactor everywhere. A rose placed upon her window-sill, a folded note slipped beneath her writing desk, a subtle arrangement of music in the salon that seemed to reflect her own unspoken melancholy. Each gesture was small, yet laden with intention, a language she did not fully understand but which resonated with a thrill that society's judgment could not touch. Her heart, long trained in the discipline of courtesy and silence, beat with a rhythm that was both foreign and intoxicating. At the same time, the social gossip continued unabated. At tea with acquaintances, delicate phrases were exchanged with razor-edge precision. One must admire courage in the face of adversity, or, it is curious how fortunes may shift even without intention. Lady Eleanor could not escape the suffocating awareness that every glance, every polite smile, contained hidden commentary. Yet, within this web of observation, the threads of intrigue grew stronger, drawing her toward the invisible hand that guided these tokens and messages. She found herself watching for the shadowed figure who lingered at the edges of rooms, whose presence was always just out of reach, and imagining the face behind the deliberate care and quiet audacity of his gestures. One evening, the estate's gardens, frosted with the memory of snow and lit by lanterns that cast trembling shadows, became the setting for her first direct encounter. She had slipped away to breathe, to let the world's whispers fade into the crisp night. The sound of a carriage passing on the distant road stirred the silence, and then, footsteps, measured, deliberate, approaching. She did not flinch. A man emerged from the shadow of the arbor, tall, impeccably dressed, yet with an ease that betrayed confidence tempered by observation. His eyes met hers immediately, dark and assessing, yet softened by a hint of something personal, something reserved only for her. "Milady," he said, voice low but clear, each word carrying the weight of propriety and the subtle caress of familiarity. "You are far from warmth, and yet I find you here as if drawn by the very chill of winter itself." Lady Eleanor's fingers tightened around the edges of her muff. "And you, sir, are you the spirit of frost come to taunt me further?" Her tone was playful, yet beneath it lingered an edge of nervousness. She did not know if she should feel threatened, relieved, or entirely captivated. He inclined his head slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement that carried with it unspoken knowledge. "I am an observer, milady, nothing more, yet I confess, I have watched with interest how you carry yourself in circumstances few could endure with such grace." His words were formal, yet each syllable resonated with personal regard. Lady Eleanor felt warmth, dangerous and unbidden, pool in her chest. She realized with a start that the embarrassment of the ballroom, the sting of whispers, and the weight of societal eyes were all tempered by the subtle attention of this man. She wanted to know him, and yet feared what understanding might cost her. Their conversation lingered in measured pauses, a dialogue of gestures as much as words. A pressed flower he held, extended with a careful hand, a glove left inadvertently at her side. Each act was deliberate, intimate, and imbued with a quiet poetry that both unsettled and thrilled her. They spoke of trivialities, weather, literature, music, but each sentence was carefully chosen, weighted with meaning, a silent acknowledgement that the world could not yet know what passed between them. When he departed, leaving only a hint of cologne and the echo of his measured steps, Lady Eleanor remained in the lantern-lit garden, clutching the flower he had placed within her gloved fingers. A tempest of emotions swirled within her: curiosity, fear, hope, and a delicate, rising pulse of longing that she could not name. The evening had shifted something fundamental in her understanding. The anonymous gestures were no accident, the fascination was no whim. Someone, enigmatic and daring, had chosen her as the focal point of intention and attention in a world that sought only to judge and diminish. As she returned indoors, snow glittering underfoot like powdered diamonds, she glanced toward the window where the first lanterns of the estate flickered. Somewhere, unseen, the man who had orchestrated these small intimations observed still. And Lady Eleanor, heart caught between caution and the thrill of discovery, understood that her life was no longer a simple passage through the etiquette of society. It was entwined now with a presence as mysterious as it was magnetic, a force that promised danger, revelation, and perhaps possibility of something altogether forbidden. Her fingers tightened around the sapphire brooch upon her bosom, its cold weight a tether between her fear and fascination. And in the silence that followed, as snow whispered against window panes and the distant town clock struck its solitary hour, thought pressed upon her with urgent clarity. Someone is watching, someone is guiding, and this story has only just begun. The rain fell in silvery threads that glossed the cobblestones outside the Ashcroft estate, drumming a soft, insistent rhythm against the tall windows. Inside, the fire sputtered and cast trembling shadows along the walls of the library, the scent of old leather and ink mingling with the faint trace of wet wool that clung to Lady Eleanor's skirts. She had sought refuge here, among books and quiet, in the hope of sorting through the swirl of confusion, embarrassment, and forbidden curiosity that had taken root in her heart. The sapphire brooch lay against her chest, a cold, tangible reminder of the secret attention that had turned her world into something simultaneously thrilling and perilous. A soft creak from the doorway made her start, her fingers tightening instinctively around the fabric of her gown. He was there, tall, dark, composed, stepping into the lamplight with an ease that betrayed the mastery of movement accustomed to observation. His presence was no longer peripheral. It filled the room, precise, commanding, yet tempered with restraint. The firelight caught the angle of his jaw, highlighted the glint in his eyes, and cast shadows that made his expression almost unreadable, yet intensely personal. He did not announce himself. He simply entered, and the world seemed to contract around the space between them. "Milady," he began, voice low and careful, each word deliberate, "you do me the honor of appearing entirely unafraid of solitude, yet I suspect you are anything but calm within these walls." The observation, as formal as it was intimate, brushed against the edges of propriety and yet spoke directly to her heart. Lady Eleanor drew a shallow breath, trying to summon the composure that her upbringing demanded. "And if I were afraid?" she murmured, meeting his gaze steadily despite the tremor in her pulse. "Would you?" She hesitated, uncertain whether to finish the question, whether to invite him into her fragile world of fears. He moved closer, closing the distance with careful deliberation, and laid a single gloved hand upon the arm of her chair. "Then I would hope to be of some comfort," he said quietly, though his words carried the resonance of something far deeper. "Yet you must understand, milady, I am bound by circumstance as much as you are. I cannot promise more than that which is possible without scandal, without peril." Even as he spoke, a subtle intensity threaded through each phrase, a cadence that both restrained and revealed. Lady Eleanor felt the truth of it in the tension coiling in her chest, the knowledge that he was both present and inaccessible, a force she could not fully claim. The firelight flickered, casting shadows across the spines of books that lined the walls, and in that shifting light, she noticed the subtle gifts he had left over the past days. A pressed violet tucked into a page of her journal, a carefully chosen line of poetry folded in her hand, each a sign of deliberate attention. She realized that he had been watching, understanding her reactions, her silences, her measured smiles. It was at once unnerving and intoxicating, and her pulse betrayed her composure. "Why?" she asked softly, unable to restrain the question any longer. "Why observe me so?" He met her eyes with a steadiness that disarmed her. "Because, milady," he said, voice lowered almost to a whisper, "you are more than society permits you to be. In every measured glance, every careful word you speak, there is strength and a resilience that deserves recognition. I cannot remain silent, for I see what others fail to notice." His words, formal yet profoundly personal, wrapped around her heart, stirring a tempest she had not anticipated. For a moment all else fell away, the fire, the rain, the looming presence of judgment, and only the raw, intimate truth between them remained. Lady Eleanor's hands trembled slightly in her lap, the brooch pressing into her chest as though it sought to anchor her against the rush of emotion. "And yet," she faltered, the weight of propriety and expectation pressing against her desire to reach toward him, "and yet, you are not free to offer more. Your attention, your kindness, it cannot absolve me of what the world sees." Her voice quavered with the delicate tension of someone caught between longing and fear, a fine line she had walked her entire life. He inclined his head, a shadow of understanding darkening his expression. "I am painfully aware of the world, milady," he said almost mournfully, "and I am equally aware that my feelings, though present, profound and unchanging, must contend with obligations of which you cannot yet know. I would not wish to compromise you, yet neither can I deny what I see, what I feel, what has taken root since the moment I first observed you." There was an almost unbearable intensity in his words, an admission couched in formality yet unmistakably raw. Lady Eleanor felt her heart constrict and then expand, a dual ache of fear and desire that left her breathless. The room held them in suspended intimacy, punctuated only by the soft patter of rain and the occasional crackle of the fire. He moved slightly closer, allowing the light to illuminate his expression fully, revealing a vulnerability she had not expected, a silent confession wrapped in carefully measured restraint. "I wish I could act more boldly," he admitted, "to speak without constraint, to ensure that no shadow of doubt or cruelty reaches you. But prudence, society's relentless prudence, binds me. For now all I can offer is truth, and the small acts that may remind you that you are not unseen." Lady Eleanor lifted her gloved hand, tracing the outline of the brooch, and found courage in the subtle defiance of its presence. "Then speak your truth even if only in gestures," she whispered, her voice steadying as the first threads of hope wove through her fear. "Let me know that what I feel is not imagined, that there is someone who recognizes me." The words, delicate yet daring, carried the weight of admission, the dangerous thrill of acknowledging the magnetic presence she had long felt but could not name. A pause settled between them, the quiet intimacy of shared understanding, and in that space, the air seemed to hum with possibilities, with unspoken promises, with the tension of feelings too vast to be fully contained. The storm outside mirrored the tempest within, rain striking windows like fingers drumming impatiently against the walls, as if urging them to speak more, to reveal more, to step further into peril and revelation. Finally, he extended his gloved hand, not to take but to offer, an unspoken question, a silent invitation, a promise measured yet profound. Lady Eleanor's gaze lingered on it, the faint weight of courage and desire coiling through her. She knew that the path ahead was fraught with social peril and emotional risk, yet in that single gesture lay the first step toward an intimacy that was both terrifying and irresistible. As she reached toward the hand, a thought struck her with sudden clarity, a secret, hidden yet undeniable, a truth that neither firelight nor whispered words could mask. The engagement contract, a binding arrangement of ink and power, had already been signed. The realization pressed against her like the chill of the rain outside, a reminder that desire and propriety, longing and duty, were not allies in this story. The Duke's intentions, however earnest and tender, were intertwined with obligations she could not yet comprehend, and the tension between freedom and fate tightened around her like a finely wrought corset. And in that moment, the storm outside mirrored the storm within, leaving Lady Eleanor poised on the edge of revelation, desire, and the inescapable gravity of a truth that threatened to change everything she thought she knew. The winter garden shimmered beneath a pale, crescent moon, lanterns casting pools of gold along the snow-dusted paths. Lady Eleanor moved with measured steps, her gown brushing the frost-kissed gravel, each footfall echoing softly in the still night. The sapphire brooch pressed against her chest felt heavier now, a reminder not only of attention but of stakes she had yet to fully comprehend. Her mind circled endlessly around the words of the last encounter, the Duke's confession, and the silent promises that had threaded themselves into her heart. The chill in the air seemed to sharpen her resolve, and for the first time since the ballroom, she allowed herself the dangerous luxury of hope. He emerged from the shadows, tall, dark, his presence folding the garden into a private world that belonged solely to them. No announcement, no preamble, only the certainty of his gaze, steady and unwavering. She felt her pulse quicken under its weight, a combination of fear, longing, and the unspoken tension of anticipation. His gloved hand hovered near hers, the invisible space between them electric with unexpressed intent. The moonlight caught the edge of his coat, outlining the elegance of form and the precision of posture, and yet beneath it lay the warmth of personal regard, subtle and undeniable. "Milady," he began, voice low and deliberate, "the world may believe you overlooked, judged, or dismissed, but I cannot abide that truth unchallenged. There are contracts signed, obligations sworn, and yet it is not the ink that binds me to indifference." His words, formal yet intimate, brushed the edges of propriety while striking directly at her heart. Lady Eleanor lifted her chin, steadying herself against the swell of emotion that threatened to overwhelm her. "And yet," she whispered, "it is the world that holds the pen and I little more than ink upon the page." He stepped closer, the space between them narrowing, careful not to overwhelm, but deliberate in intention. "Then allow me, milady, to write with deeds, not words. To honor the measure of your strength, the courage in your eyes, and the dignity you maintain in the face of scrutiny. The world may not yet understand, but I will act where others falter." There was a tremor beneath the control in his voice, a fragile honesty that shivered beneath the formality. Her breath caught, and she realized with startling clarity that her heart no longer measured propriety against desire. It measured the man before her, the one who saw her fully, even through society's cruel lens. A carriage bell tolled faintly in the distance, breaking the spell, and yet he did not move. Instead, he produced a small leather-bound volume from beneath his coat, placing it gently into her hands. "Read, milady, and you shall see not only my regard but the proof of my intentions, sealed and witnessed." She opened it cautiously. Inside were notes, observations, and plans that detailed his careful attention to her well-being, his subtle interventions in moments of social peril, and at last the undeniable truth. The engagement contract had been signed on her behalf, a declaration binding in ink, yet wrought without her knowledge. Shock washed over her, mingling with anger, betrayal, and a strange undercurrent of awe. You committed this without my knowledge?" Her voice was trembling yet controlled, the words sharp and deliberate. "You have stolen my choice." The garden, so still and quiet moments before, seemed to echo her emotion, the snow-covered branches quivering under the weight of unspoken judgment. He met her gaze unwaveringly, a mixture of resolve and deference in his posture. "I did not steal, milady. I acted with foresight, with the knowledge that society would not wait, and that your dignity would suffer if left to chance. The world does not honor strength in women, nor the quiet courage it requires. My actions, though bold, were born of admiration, protection, and, if I may speak frankly, love." Each word resonated, heavy with sincerity, formal yet profoundly intimate. Lady Eleanor's knees weakened slightly as she struggled to reconcile her outrage with the undeniable truth of his intentions. The tension between them became palpable, a taut thread suspended over a precipice of societal expectation and personal longing. Her hand shook as she placed the volume upon a snow-dusted bench, fingers brushing against the leather. "And yet," she said softly, the edge of fear giving way to the thrill of challenge, "I am expected to comply, to bend to the will of contracts and custom, and to regard you favorably?" There was irony in her tone, yet beneath it lay a tender curiosity, a desire to probe the sincerity behind his audacious actions. He advanced one careful step, extending a gloved hand, not to seize but to offer, a gesture weighted with intent, respect, and the unspoken acknowledgement of the power he held and the restraint he exercised. "Favorably, milady?" he asked. "I ask for more than your compliance. I ask for your understanding, your trust, and, should you allow it, your partnership in defiance of expectation. You are no mere subject to circumstance. You are the architect of your own place, and I would walk beside you, not above nor beyond." His words were measured yet magnetic, formal yet imbued with warmth, each phrase a delicate weave of respect and passion. Lady Eleanor's chest rose and fell rapidly, a mixture of awe, excitement, and apprehension constricting her. She recognized, with startling clarity, that the man before her had not simply observed her. He had acted to ensure her safety, her dignity, and now, the possibility of something far greater. The garden, bathed in moonlight and the occasional glow of lanterns, became a theater of revelation and confrontation, where desire and propriety collided with a tension that left her both breathless and emboldened. "Then, you ask me to trust even as the world conspires against us?" she whispered, her fingers hovering just above his offered hand. The moment held suspended, electric and intimate, each heartbeat a drum of anticipation and fear. "Yes," he replied, voice low, unwavering, "and to understand that love, true, deliberate, and enduring, is the only currency that matters when all else fails." For a heartbeat, they lingered in the charged quiet, the snow sparkling beneath the lanterns, the garden suspended in an almost unnatural serenity. And then, as if summoned by fate, a carriage door slammed in the distance, and voices rose sharply in the courtyard beyond, carrying with them the unmistakable timbre of social intrusion, the whisper of scandal, and the threat of exposure. Lady Eleanor's gaze met his, wide and searching, a storm of emotion reflected in the depth of her dark eyes. He responded with a tilt of the head, a subtle promise, and a hand that hovered in silent assurance. The truth had been revealed, intentions laid bare, yet the danger, the stakes, and the intricate web of society's scrutiny remained, poised to test the fragile bond that had begun to form between them. And in that frozen lantern-lit garden, amidst the hush of falling snow and the approaching clamor of the outside world, Lady Eleanor understood, with a pulse of fear and exhilaration, that her choice, her defiance, and her heart would be challenged in ways she had scarcely imagined, and that the night had only just begun to reveal its secrets. Snowflakes drifted lazily across the courtyard, catching in the folds of Lady Eleanor's gown as she stepped carefully along the frozen path. The night air bit at her cheeks, sharp and bracing, but the tension that clung to her heart was far colder. Within the estate, voices murmured, servants whispering hurriedly, distant laughter carrying hints of scandal. But out here, beneath the muted glow of lanterns, there was only the weight of the moment between her and the Duke. His presence was immediate, commanding, yet tempered with a respect that had always both unsettled and enthralled her. He waited, hands folded behind his back, posture impeccable, gaze fixed upon her with an intensity that seemed to see into every guarded corner of her heart. "Milady," he said softly, voice low and steady, "the hour has come for truth, not shadows. You know the contract is signed. You know my intentions. And yet," his eyes softened, betraying the faintest trace of vulnerability beneath the mask of authority, "I await your choice. Not out of obligation, but for the certainty that it is freely given, rather than compelled." The words fell across the frozen ground between them, each syllable resonating with solemnity and care. Lady Eleanor's chest tightened as she realized that the culmination of weeks of whispered gestures, secret tokens, and shared glances had led to this precise, trembling juncture. She lifted her gaze, letting it meet his fully for the first time without reservation, and saw in his dark eyes both a challenge and a promise. Her voice, when she finally spoke, trembled not with fear but with the accumulation of longing, indignation, and hope. "And if I accept," she asked, the words careful, precise, "then what of the whispers, the judgments, the eyes that will seek to dismantle us?" She gestured subtly toward the distant estate windows, where lanterns flickered like watchful sentinels. He stepped closer, bridging the final span between them with a grace that seemed effortless yet deliberate. "Then we will meet them, milady," he said, each word deliberate, formal yet imbued with warmth, not as the powerless subjects of gossip, but as equals, bound by choice, by respect, and by a truth that no society can diminish. The world may attempt to dictate, but it cannot touch the essence of what is freely given between two hearts. There was a pulse in his voice, subtle yet undeniable, that reverberated through her, leaving her both breathless and grounded. Lady Eleanor's gloved hand hovered near his, an unspoken question lodged within the delicate curvature of her fingers. She felt the spark of danger in touching him, the weight of scandal that could descend upon them, yet the pull of desire, recognition, and the magnetic inevitability of their connection proved stronger than fear. Slowly, deliberately, she extended her hand. His own moved to meet it, a light but steadfast pressure that conveyed the magnitude of his intent without overwhelming her agency. "You must understand," he continued, voice softened yet commanding, "that what is written in contracts and witnessed by society matters little when compared to the reality we can create together. I offer not dominance nor possession but partnership, respect and, if you allow it, love." The word lingered between them, heavy and potent, a single thread weaving their separate existences into a shared tapestry. Lady Eleanor's breath hitched, the snow seemed to hush around them, the distant whispers fading into irrelevance as the truth of that declaration settled upon her heart. For a moment, silence reigned, the world contracting to the space between two hands, two hearts, two souls teetering on the precipice of revelation and risk. She felt the cold bite of the night against her cheeks, the icy tension of possibility that stretched taut in the air, and yet beneath it all, a warmth began to bloom, tentative, fragile, but insistent. With a deliberate tilt of her head, she allowed herself a small, daring smile, one that acknowledged both the audacity of their position and the courage that had brought her here. "You speak boldly," she murmured, voice quiet yet clear, "and yet I sense the truth of it behind every measured word and careful gesture. I will accept, not out of obligation, but because I see you as you see me, not as society demands but as I truly am." The statement, though restrained, carried the weight of emancipation, defiance, and tender acknowledgement all at once. The Duke's expression softened, a subtle warmth breaking through the rigid composure he had maintained for so long, and for a brief, exquisite moment, the tension between them eased into a delicate equilibrium of trust, desire, and mutual recognition. He took her hand fully into his own now, a slow, deliberate motion that conveyed both protection and reverence. "Then it is done, milady," he whispered, his voice vibrating with quiet triumph and profound relief. "You are no longer merely the subject of whispers. You are my equal, my companion, my chosen. Together we shall face the world as it is, with courage, with dignity, and with the knowledge that what we share is neither trivial nor transient." Lady Eleanor felt the icy tension of fear and anticipation melt, replaced by a shiver of exhilaration that surged through her, uniting them in a moment that was intimate, sacred, and irrevocable. The snow swirled more densely now, drifting like powdered diamonds around them, as if nature itself had conspired to cloak their triumph from prying eyes. The distant clamor of voices from the estate remained, but it was muted, almost ceremonial, a reminder that society's judgment persisted, yet could no longer define the boundaries of their connection. Each breath they drew together seemed to fuse with the rhythm of the night, each heartbeat a silent vow, each glance a testament to the fragile audacity of their choice. He released her hand, allowing it to rest lightly against his chest, and bowed his head with a quiet, formal elegance that had always fascinated her. "Milady," he said, voice low, intimate, yet steeped in ceremony, "what we have begun tonight is not merely the conclusion of circumstance, nor the fulfillment of obligation. It is a promise, delicate yet steadfast, forged in the intersection of choice and truth. I shall not falter in honoring it." She could feel the cadence of sincerity in every word, the careful balance of restraint and unguarded emotion that defined him so completely. Tears pricked the corners of her eyes, not from sorrow but from the overwhelming intensity of the moment, the convergence of fear, longing, scandal, and hope into a single crystalline truth. Lady Eleanor allowed herself to step closer, closing the space between them fully, and rested her forehead lightly against his. The gesture, silent yet potent, conveyed all the trust, desire, and acknowledgement that words alone could never encompass. He responded in kind, a gentle hand rising to cradle her face, thumb brushing softly against the delicate curve of her cheek, grounding her, affirming her, anchoring her to the present and the choice she had made. From within the estate, the faintest echo of conversation reached them again, a distant reminder that the world persisted beyond the lantern-lit garden, but neither dared to move. In that suspended moment, snow drifting endlessly around them, the storm of social expectation, scandal, and whispers felt muted, irrelevant. Here, beneath the pale moon and in the quiet intimacy of shared understanding, Lady Eleanor and the Duke existed solely for each other, a truth neither circumstance nor society could erase. And as she lifted her eyes to his once more dark pools reflecting the moonlight and the shimmer of snow, she understood fully that the events of the past weeks, the humiliation, the anonymous gestures, the daring confessions, had all led to this singular, irrevocable moment. Their bond, forged in secrecy, tested by scrutiny and strengthened by courage, had reached its apex. The night had delivered its trials, its revelations and its truths, leaving them poised at the precipice of a future where choice, love and dignity intertwined irrevocably. As the first faint blush of dawn touched the horizon, painting the snow in muted rose and gold, Lady Eleanor felt a shiver of triumph and exhilaration run through her. The world awaited them beyond the lantern-lit garden, relentless, observing and judgmental, yet within the fragile sanctuary of shared understanding, they had carved a space that no scandal could undo, no whisper could diminish, and no obligation could define. And in the quiet, electrified pause before the rising sun, the promise of their future, tangled, daring and wholly their own, stretched out before them, luminous, infinite and impossible to ignore.